في فعاليات الجلسة الخامسة من هذه الندوة المهمة في يومها الثاني تحت عنوان جهود التوعية والتدريب ودورها في تحقيق السلامة في مرافق الإمداد بالطاقة الكهربائية. وسوف يتولى رئاسة هذه الجلسة سعادة المهندس عبد الله القريشي، فليتفضل هو والمتحدثين مشكورين. إذن الأستاذ عبد الله القريشي هو مدير إدارة الخدمات الاستشارية في أرامكو السعودية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. نرحب بكم أيها الأخوة جميعا في الجلسة الخامسة اليوم، وهي عن جهود التوعية والتدريب ودورها في تحقيق مرافق الإمداد بالطاقة الكهربائية. ويعتبر أيها الأخوة هذا المحور، محور التوعية والتدريب، وأهم المحاور الذي يساعد في تلافي الأخطار، لأنه يركز على الفرد توعية وتدريبا. وما هذه الندوة إلا إحدى الوسائل والطرق التي تدعم هذا المحور لأهميته. معنا أيها الإخوة في هذه الجلسة 3 أوراق عمل، ونحب أن ننوه على بعض التغيير، حيث اعتذر الأخ محمد الخراشي، وسوف نستعيض عن ورقته بورقة عمل أخرى يقدمها المهندس زهير جوما. في هذه الجلسة أيها الإخوة ستكون الورقة الأولى عن العادات السبع لسلامة القوس الكهربائي للمهندس زهير جوما. حصل السيد زهير جوما على درجة البكالوريوس في الهندسة الكهربائية، ولديه خبرة عملية كبيرة أسهم خلالها في العديد من البرامج والأنشطة المتعلقة بالسلامة الكهربائية في جنوب أفريقيا وعددا من الدول الأفريقية، كما شارك في العديد من اللجان الوطنية والدولية. Engineer Zuhair, please start and you have 20 minutes.
Shukran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to my esteemed colleagues. This is a last-minute standby presentation, so please excuse me, we just ran around and got the videos going just now. Okay, today we're going to talk about 7 electrical safety habits. So we're going to study, we're going to discuss the 7 electrical safety habits. And eHazard, as a global company, has done over 175 accident investigations, and most of those investigations included more than one person. So generally, most of you are aware that when an arc flash incident occurs, it's more than one person who's usually injured. Sometimes it's 2, and on average, we find 3 people injured per accident. So with the fact that we've done over 175 global accident investigation studies, we have been able to deduce that there are 7 essential habits, which if implemented, not a single one of those accidents would have resulted in a fatality or a disability. So what we're presenting to you now is years of research that we've put together. Let's first start off with statistics, because statistics are important to convince the audience about the reality of electrical arc flash safety. Dr. Mary Capelli-Schellpfeffer, in an IEEE paper, studied EDF, the electricity distributor of France, and over a 10-year period, she studied 120,000 workers. And of that 120,000 workers, what she found was, on average, we had 125 incidents per annum. And of that 125, 77% of them contained an arc component. That's a very scary number, 77%. Of those, 21% were disabling injuries. That meant a person would lose an arm, would lose a limb, probably will have psychological trauma and would not be able to resume their normal work functions. And 2.4% of those were fatalities. Now, how scary is that? Over a 10-year period, you have approximately 3 people dying per year. That's a total of 30 people because of electrical arc flash exposure. Okay, so I'm going to skip through some of the slides. It's going to be there in your presentation CD, but just to keep to time, I'm going to try and focus on just the 7 essential habits, because some of the stuff that I was going to discuss has already been touched on earlier this morning. All right, so the 7 habits. Let me quickly mention these 7 habits to you, and then I will explain for the remaining time that I have. The 7 habits, habit number 1, and this is in order of priority. What we found was habit number 1 is always test for the absence of voltage. For every single electrical worker, even the presentation that we dealt with earlier with regards to earthing, once again, starting to cut a cable without testing. Test before touching. Then there's also been cases where we've tested earth application devices which look perfect on the surface, but when they tested electrically, they fail. Coming back to point number 1, always use voltage-rated gloves, because you never know the tool that you are using to apply your earth, your voltage detector, your phase comparator. Visually verifying it does not imply that the tool is perfect or functional or maintains its dielectric rating. So what we say is, habit number 1 is always test for the absence of voltage and ensure that you use voltage-rated or dielectric gloves, or some of you know it as rubber gloves. Habit number 2 is always establish worker boundaries. Now, we've also spoke about boundaries. You've seen in the exhibition boundaries. We speak about limited, restricted. Those are the shock boundaries. And we speak about an arc flash boundary, which is a boundary at which the energy from the arc decreases to 1.2 calories per centimeter squared. I will elaborate on this a little later. Habit number 3 calls for daily workwear. Do you know in those 175 accident investigations that we have performed globally, guess where we've seen most burns? Most burns occur on the hands, on the chin, the neck area, and the face. That is where most of the burns are occurring. Check with your safety statistics as well. Where are you seeing most of those burns? Okay, so what habit number 3 is all about is the use of daily workwear. Do you know flash suits were nice? Okay, flash suits are nice. Flash suits have their place. But there's an importance on daily workwear, and our focus needs to change to supplying daily workwear to all of our electrical workers. Okay, I don't sell PPE, so this is not a marketing campaign. All right, habit number 4 is always use earth leakage or a ground fault circuit interrupter whenever human contact is present. Habit number 5 goes about creating an electrically safe work condition. In the presentations that I've seen thus far, we spoke about isolation, we spoke about permits, we spoke about all facets of making safe. But the NFPA 70E definition of creating an electrically safe work condition is by far the most comprehensive. And we're going to discuss that in detail a little while later. Habit number 6 talks about plan your jobs and always address the greater hazard. We're going to be talking about the greater hazard later, and I will explain to you what do I mean by the greater hazard. Because, believe it or not, just to simplify it, there are only 2 situations under which a person is allowed to work live. Just 2. And I will discuss that with you later. And habit number 7 is always audit your systems. Remember in my talk yesterday, I mentioned that auditing of systems is so important for 2 reasons. Because we don't know what we don't know. Okay, and in some cases, we actually know what we don't know. Auditing of the system gives you those gaps. Okay, so let's start off with habit number 1. Habit number 1, we talk about dielectric gloves. And dielectric gloves, there's 2 standards for them internationally renowned standards. One is the ASTM D120 standard, which pertains to the use of dielectric gloves. And the other is the IEC 60903 standard. And both of these standards refer to classes of gloves. And you would have seen there was a demonstration here next door where your class 00 glove is good for 500 volts AC or 750 volts DC. But let's look at it from an arc flash point of view. Besides providing a dielectric rating, what we see is that our class 0 glove, for example, and if you look at here, your blue glove, okay, your blue glove, which does about 41.9 calories per centimeter squared. And if you look at a normal cowhide, 43 calories per centimeter squared. The implication thereof is that if you use a dielectric glove and a leather overprotector over that dielectric glove, you have an arc rating of about 80 calories per centimeter squared. Now, my day job is actually doing network analysis and power system analysis and determining correct grading and arc flash energy levels. And let me tell you, there are very few. There's probably only about 5% of the installations that I work with that are more than 80 calories per centimeter squared. So a simple 500 volt glove or 1000 volt glove, which is a class 0 glove, with a thin leather overprotector can offer you 80 calories per centimeter squared. There's no reason why we should not protect ourselves from shock and arc flash. Interestingly enough, the same mechanism that causes electrical shock also causes an electrical arc flash. Okay, so when we speak about dielectric tools, sorry, that wasn't me. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Dielectric tools. I'll try and speak louder than them. Dielectric tools are a requirement by NFPA 70E, or alternatively known as insulated tools. And these tools need to comply with the ASTM F1505 standard or the IEC 60900 standard. Okay, what we recommend is a dual substrate in terms of orange on the outside and maybe yellow on the inside. And the benefit of that is that once you wear out the orange layer, you can see the yellow layer, which means that you've worn away the dielectric, that this is no longer an insulated tool. Okay, so just to summarize habit number 1, and I think it was mentioned in the previous presentation with regards to earthing as well, switch off, gloves on, insulated tools. Okay, always test for the absence of voltage and use voltage rated gloves where applicable. Habit number 2 speaks about boundaries, and NFPA 70E 2015 edition has now done away with the prohibited approach boundary. I'm sure all of you would remember it was the limited approach boundary, the restricted approach boundary, and the prohibited approach boundary. Now the NFPA 70E only speaks about a limited approach boundary and a restricted approach boundary. So the requirements for the restricted approach boundary, okay, you can nod if you know it. Basically, you need to be a qualified person, you need to use insulated tools, insulated workwear, that means dielectric gloves, and you need to have an energized electrical work permit now in the new NFPA 70E.
10 minutes, Zahir, huh? 10 minutes.
Time flies when you're having fun. Okay, shock protection boundaries we spoke about. Now your arc flash protection boundary. If an arc were to occur, okay, at this particular region, okay, let's imagine that this is an electrical panel, and if an arc had to occur on this panel, the arc energy is a function of the system energy, the system fault current. I saw a presentation earlier which spoke, sorry, is that me? Okay, I saw a presentation earlier which spoke about voltages and boundaries. And I tend to challenge that because the predominant factor with regards to arc flash energy calculations is fault current. And specifically, IEEE 1584 refers to steady state bolted fault current. So you have to understand your subtransient, your transient, and your bolted fault currents before you actually attempt to determine what's your arc flash energy. And from your arc flash energy, you basically calculate the distance at which the energy decreases to 1.2 calories per centimeter squared. And that is your arc flash protection boundary. What does that mean? All of us talk about boundaries. Okay, once you are outside of your boundary, it means that the energy, the maximum available energy from that explosion decreases to a point where a worker would experience a first-degree burn. A first-degree burn is very similar to a sunburn. It's a superficial burn, and it doesn't cause any irreversible damage to the body. Okay, so those are your boundaries. My slide here is slightly outdated, so bear with me. But with regards to the shock boundary, now we only have the limited approach boundary and the restricted approach boundary. The prohibited approach boundary is done away with, and you've got your arc flash boundary. Now, please don't be deceived by my slide. You need to calculate because your arc flash protection boundary could be within your shock boundary or outside of your shock protection boundary. This is just a drawing for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we spoke about the arc flash protection boundary. Habit number 3 is always use daily workwear, and daily workwear with face protection. Because what we see in the next slide, oh, my slides have been mixed up a little. All right. With regards to hazardous category, hazardous category is also done away with in 2015. Are you aware of that? We no longer talk about a hazardous category. We talk about an arc risk category. Category 0 is done away with. So the minimum arc risk category now is category 1, which is a minimum of 4. What we strongly recommend is actually go out and do it immediately. Supply your entire workforce with arc risk category 2 type of clothing. Once again, I don't sell clothing, so I'm not trying to do any marketing here. Okay, because what's very important is with regards to arc rated clothing will burn. Okay, arc rated clothing will burn. And what you see in this video is we actually did this test where we compared arc rated clothing, polycotton, and cotton. Now, cotton was the talk of the day in the past, okay, because cotton does burn. There's a point at which you ignite cotton and then it starts burning. But with regards to arc-rated clothing, it burns only for the duration that it's exposed to the arc energy, and as soon as you remove that energy, it internally, automatically self-extinguishes. Okay, so it self-extinguishes. NFPA 70E strictly prohibits the use of melting substrates. When we speak about melting substrates, we speak about polyester, polycottons, acrylics, spandex, lycra. All of those are strictly prohibited anywhere in the body, even if used as innerwear, for example, a t-shirt, or as underwear. It is strictly prohibited. Now, Bill Mattiford did a quick study, because I know it's a finance game at the end of the day. Bill Mattiford did a quick study where there were two companies. And company one failed to roll out any form of ArcRated clothing, whereas company number two rolled out ArcRated clothing, but it was the wrong type of ArcRated clothing. For the company which had done nothing, it ended up with a fatality. And it ended up costing the company around 1.6 million US dollars. Now, this might not sound a lot, but this was back in 1990. Can you imagine with escalation what that true value is? Yesterday, I quoted you a value of about 13 million US dollars. Whereas a company which rolled out the incorrect ArcRated, ArcRisk category 2 types of clothing, daily workwear, only incurred a 45,000 US dollar loss with regards to equipment replacement. Okay, so in that case, the person walked away from the incident. Now, you've got to be very careful, because I know a lot of chemical industry also uses face shields, and you've got to be very careful about the type of face shields you use, because in this case what happened was the company was supplied with ArcRated clothing, and these gentlemen were using ArcRated clothing, and what happened was, because of the ignition of the visor, you had melting and dripping, which then attached itself to the ArcRated clothing, resulting in severe third-degree burns. And these two workers, by the way, this is an accident reenactment, because part of our services are we provide forensic investigations. And what we did was we reenacted the study. But the two people who were involved in this accident were disabled, permanently disabled, and unable to return to work.
5 minutes.
Shukran. Okay, I've only got 3 more habits to go, so it should take 3 minutes more. All right, habit number 4 is the use of earth leakage or ground fault interrupting circuit interrupters. I'm not going to speak about that much. Now, habit number 5, I just want to spend a minute and a half on that. Okay, habit number 5 refers to creating an electrically safe work condition. And when we speak about an electrically safe work condition, what eHazard has done is we've come up with a very simple acronym called ISOLATE. Now, ISOLATE simply, the I stands for identify all energy sources, S stands for switch off, O stands for open your disconnects, L stands for lockout, tag out, A stands for, and here's the important one, A stands for assure that the contacts are open visually if possible. T stands for test. That means that we're looking at line testing as well as phase testing on systems that have an earth reference. Okay, and most importantly, what we refer to as well in our program is we call for the testing of your equipment. So we refer to live, dead, live type of testing, and E is for earthing where applicable. Obviously on your Delta systems which have no reference to earth, earthing would be pointless and create a greater hazard in that case. Okay, hazard number 6, we refer to taking on a drill. Habit number 6, we refer to identifying a greater hazard. Remember earlier on I told you there's only 2 examples, there's only 2 cases in which a person is allowed to work live. Does anybody know what those 2 are? Actually, because of time, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to answer. But the only 2 instances in which a person is allowed to work live. Number 1 is when you have an infeasibility concept. An infeasibility concept, for example, is where you are doing troubleshooting and you need to measure voltage. Where you are doing phasing, so you need to compare red to red, white to white, blue to blue. The greater hazard concept refers to a concept where, for example, you've got a hazardous classified area, a hazardous location, and you need to switch off the main ventilation fans. And if you do that, or if it's a life support system, you could end up creating a greater hazard. Okay, so when we speak about the greater hazard, we also require you to plan your jobs, and the greater hazard in this case as well also enforces you to do your engineering study, and based on your engineering study, buy the required PPE. Do you know, even as I was standing there yesterday by one of these suppliers, somebody went out to the supplier and asked, but what is the maximum that you have? Is that engineering? Is that the way we approach engineering? What is the maximum that you have? Do you know the problem is, if you've got 40 calories per centimeter squared of energy and you supply people with 90 calories, you've basically almost tripled the layer of clothing that they need to use. Would you use that clothing out in 50 degrees Celsius heat? No, you wouldn't. Okay, so engineering helps from comfort, and comfort promotes usability. Okay, with regards to labeling, the NFPA 70E requires two compulsory. It requires your voltage.
3 minutes to conclude, please.
Shukran. Two requirements, your nominal system voltage and your arc flash boundary. And then the third requirement is somehow or the other you've got to notify the user as to what type of clothing they need to use in this particular application. That can be you state the calorie, you state the arc risk category, or you can refer to it as daily or high risk workwear. Okay, I love this video here because it actually summarizes arc flash in a flash. Okay, and what you have here is a type of ejected arc that was promoted by Dr. Sweeting and Stokes in a white paper that they wrote. And what's interesting is in slow motion, you actually see the arc occurring. But in real life, you don't have a chance of seeing anything. Okay, you don't actually see the zero crossing. You don't see the plasma. You don't see the plasma spray. All you see is severe third-degree burns. And just for your information, typically these type of burns would result in a fatality. So what we recommend is either hazard risk category 1 or hazard risk category 2. And finally, habit number 7 refers to auditing, because there's a lot of literature which is written which states that most companies with all of their safety programs in place only receive about a 60 to 70% baseline scores. Training and measurement pushes you up to around about 80, but auditing is the final bit that really closes the deal. Thank you very much for your time. I've had to rush through these slides, but please contact me if you require more details with regards to the presentation. As I mentioned previously, 175 accident investigations comprising of more than one person in most of these cases, and not a single one of those accidents would have resulted in a disability or a fatality had these 7 habits been followed. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Engineer Zuhair, for your timing and your rich presentation.